Right livelihood is the fifth factor of the Eightfold Path, and it's something that rarely gets talked about. Mindfulness gets a star billing, sometimes samadhi gets some mention, the Four Noble Truths occasionally, but right livelihood is regulated, or rather relegated, to obscurity. Roughly, the suttas talk about a few obvious, very coarse kinds of wrong livelihoods. One would be careers that involve killing humans or killing animals. Another would be stealing for a living. Another would be a slave trade, which is very interesting because not so much in modern times, but times of the Buddha in the 5th century BC, when nobody else in the world really objected to slavery, including Christ, at least scripturally, or based on scripture, or Socrates. Nobody objected to the practice of slavery. The Buddha is the only one we can find in remote times, right up to 1865 even, in the United States. They still had slavery there. So he says that it is a wrong livelihood to traffic humans. There is some very progressive ideas there, making poisons, making weaponry. This could be a very big problem, especially in the States where there is a very immense military industry and lots of newly graduated engineers that are involved in making weapons. But I would say that this is at the coarser level of things. Poisons are also included in the making of poisons, to poison of animals, even insect poisons, let alone human poisons. These are all not good ideas to make a living at. So if you're in them, you want to find your way out. And so there is another level of this as well. It's interesting to reflect, of course, on right action, which we talked about earlier. This covers a lot of wrong livelihoods, like obviously killing is under right action, not killing. So it's against the first of the 5 precepts. Stealing is mentioned under the right action, as well as lying. Whether you're lying to make a living or not, it's also a violation of right action. So there's an overlap between right livelihood and right action and right speech. But now we get to the more subtle levels of this, which would be more directly problematic for most people. And that's especially most people who want to meditate. Does your livelihood interfere with your capacity to attain serenity and focus? Does it take up all your time and energy so that you don't have time or energy for meditation or study or reflection, visiting monasteries, going on retreats? Now, there are times, circumstances in life where you have no choice. You have 13 hungry children and you have to make a living. But if there is a possibility of choices, often what happens is either people decide they need more time for meditation and they tend to downsize their job. Sometimes they take demotions. Sometimes they switch professions or careers. Sometimes there are very demanding types of careers or positions. So you might be a manager of a large number of people and you're in conflict with them on a regular basis. Well, this kind of thing, you'll find that sometimes people decide to take a demotion or change of livelihood because they can't process this job and have a sense of ease in the world at the same time. They can't focus their mind. So it's not the case for everybody. Some people enjoy a lot of complexity, but can let it go. But generally speaking, it's not so easy. So this is something that we have to evaluate for ourselves. Even in the monastic life, for instance, abbots, if they're in the midst of a busy monastery, building projects going on, and they also have to determine whether they can let go of the planning processes and the administration processes and the interaction with the various individuals and whether it encroaches on their meditation. If it does, they should then try to simplify the process, or which often happens is they will then, after a busy period, take extensive retreats. So long-term retreats without responsibility. So even if the monastic life is the case, then there could be even more in the lay life. So everybody should just evaluate honestly what stands between you and a sense of peace, and sometimes you have to make adjustments. And this goes against the stream of the conversation in society, because there's so much emphasis on livelihood. It's who you are, it's what you do, it's money, it's your future, it's pensions, it's your social class, or your social status. It's all kinds of possibilities, but you have to ask yourself whether the possibilities that can be bought with money are as valuable as the kind of possibilities that you can experience through serenity, and rather serenity of mind. If these things are in conflict, then you need to look for solutions to that. Sometimes it works the other way, where you do find peace and serenity, and that makes you disinclined, so it demotivates you. You can no longer remember why you want to be so busy and work so hard. So sometimes the meditation comes first and the livelihood changes. Sometimes the changes to the livelihood precede the arrival at that peace of mind. So it works both ways. The other areas that I think is, I encounter this a lot in the West, and I think in my own experience, in my own life, I was prone to greater more or less sensitivity of conscience about the secondary and tertiary kinds of effects of my livelihood. Everything that I did really, I was hyper concerned about the social ramifications. And this is the type of messages and preoccupations that we have in the West, because we're so socially engaged. Christianity and the aftermath of Christianity, and by the way, many of you are not Christian or never were Christian. You are immersed in post-Christian ideas that are being implanted in your minds through all kinds of means, in educational systems, political systems, literature. So you're left with a hypersensitive social conscience, and it's not necessarily conducive to peace. It's not necessarily wise. In fact, it eats up a lot of people. So what we're asking you in livelihood is not to do things that directly cause injury, but the kind of implications of livelihood, they can have all kinds of secondary effects. And so what we're asking you in livelihood is not to do things that directly cause injury, but the kind of implications of livelihood, they can have all kinds of secondary effects, right? So we're not really interested in that. The Buddha says you can't actually go through the world and have no effect on others. And sometimes it'll be harmful, but unintentionally harmful. So if you drive a bus and you have insects smacking into the windshield of your bus all the time, are you in conflict of livelihood? No, you're not. There's no intention to kill. It's not a side effect, it is a side effect of transport. Same as monks walking. At the time of the Buddha, there were Jain monks who were overly concerned about accidentally killing insects when they're walking around doing alms round or sweeping. So they would, I guess this is why they're sweeping. It's not like Zen sweeping. They have these sweepers in front of them. They would sweep ahead of themselves with a broom, or maybe a couple of them, to keep from accidentally killing insects. So the Buddha said it's very important that you understand killing is a matter of intention. Karma is a matter of intention as well. It is not completely a matter of accident or action. There is a difference when the intent is altered. So if it were a matter of accident, it would be much harder. Almost, it would be impossible to get out of samsara if it were completely based on accidents, because it's impossible to be harmless. except through the non-intention of being harmful. So this is something to really reflect on in your life. If your conscience is burdened excessively with too great of a sensitivity, too great a concern with all the ripple effects. When you are in a society where you pay taxes from your livelihood and they take a portion of that to the military, and do you feel guilty? Do you feel implicated? The Buddha would say that you're not implicated. The taxes are taken from you and they're used in ways that you can't control, and so you should not be disturbing yourself about that kind of thing as much. You may want to protest something against wars and so on, which is fine, but you're not implicated in all these aspects unless you are intentionally involved. So that's a very important distinction. If I could give a bunch of talks at schools to young people, I would just I would sort it out for them, because it's something that you can take on an enormous sense of, inappropriate guilt and responsibility for that which you are not guilty of and not responsible for. So this is a sketch of right livelihood, and you can see how deep implications go. And each of you will have a complicated relationship with your livelihood. The necessity for making a livelihood, and also, of course, the investment that you make in training for these livelihoods, and the fact that you're not always in control of these things. You're sometimes working for other people who push you towards this. Sometimes it comes down to a very difficult decision. There was a person who used to come to this monastery. He was a Thai man, and he was doing a doctorate in dentistry. And one of the things he had to do was some experiments on mice. And part of the experiment was that after it was over, he had to kill it. And this is his doctorate. That his doctorate was on the line here. So coming to the monastery, and he really had discovered a deep practice. It's a deep practice, a monastic practice in Canada, strangely enough, born and raised in Thailand. A sort of nominal Buddhist, but had discovered meditation in Canada. And he took it seriously. He went to his supervisor with a lot on the line, his whole doctorate and the whole scholarship that he had, and a livelihood ahead. And he said that I would not kill those mice. And his supervisor was very upset about this. And she said, this is a tremendous amount that's on the line here. So the man, he said, not for the sake of my doctorate or my livelihood will I do this. This is against my religion. And his supervisor wept and said, well, we'll do it theoretically then. We'll just do a theoretical study we can borrow information from. So it really was on the line, and that's how deep this can go and how meaningful it can be. Sometimes it comes down to putting yourself on the line for your beliefs and for your practice. So I'll leave that for your reflection on right livelihood.